uncontacted people are surrounded by logging companies, mining, and when the government decides that they don't want them to be contacted, all they're deciding is that we're just going to let people who are legally entering the park decide how these people are entering the world. So it's this big conflict where the government is trying to figure out how to deal with it, as well as the communities. A little background on their natural history. They live in communities anywhere from 50 to 100 families. They work in the chakra normally during the day. This is a man walking the chakra. The chakra is a field where they grow their crops, where they self-sustain themselves. Mostly yucca, pineapple, potatoes, other kinds of vegetables. Yucca is a very big source of food for them. So they'll walk 1 to 3 hours in the morning, they'll work in the farm, or they'll work on their chakra. It's a community-based thing. So everyone has their own chakra, but when harvest time comes, everyone helps each other. The community can also have a group field where they tend group crops if things don't go well in the rainy season, or if they don't get as much of a yield, they'll tap into that so they can sustain themselves. With yucca, they make a drink called masato. So you can see here, first off, what you see Western clothing, right? Western clothing is the pervasive norm, even in as deep in the Amazon as we got. We saw 3 communities outside of the restricted zone, and then we had to pass a health check to make sure mostly that we didn't have the flu or a common cold. And then we passed through the health check and we saw 3 communities in the restricted zone. Common cold is the #1 killer of these communities. Back in 2008, Discovery Channel went in. One of the guys had a respiratory illness, and they ended up killing like 30 people in this community specifically. So anyways, they make masato. Masato is a fermented yucca drink. It's their form of alcohol. They use it in a really interesting way. In the communities, there's no fighting. There's no arguments. Everyone is a unit. They're a functioning team. 3 to 4 times out of the year, they'll make these gigantic barrels of masato, and they'll get absolutely hammered. And it's during this time that they're allowed to fight. They're allowed to argue with each other. They're allowed to bring to light all these problems that they've had in the past 3 months. And then at the end of that, they go back to a functioning unit, and they kind of forget about it until the next time that they drink. It's really interesting, which, I mean, we kind of use it for the same purpose here. We just use it more on a daily basis. It was interesting every now and then one of the communities we came up on in the middle of one of these 3-day stints. We couldn't film anything, obviously, because it's just not right to. But that was powerful because that was when they let you have it. You come in and you're an outsider. They're in the mindset where they're allowed to speak their mind. They're not trying to hold anything back. They're not trying to give you this veil of who they are. And that was powerful because there's a lot of, you'll see as I continue going down this, the Amazon is an insanely complex place. To go down here with an idea of what we're going to tell, I'm glad that we didn't, because there's no way that we're going to come out with what we thought we were going to come out with. So, La Selva, or the jungle. This is what it looks like most of the time once you get out of the communities. The first thing you notice when you get this picture is a bunch of vines, some plants, a couple trees. One of the most amazing things that I thought after my time spent here is you go to a place like this with one of the community members, and they see a wealth. They see a pharmacy here. They could name 50 different plants that have 50 different medicinal uses, and they use them all the time. And they can name every one of them, and they know where every one of them are. And every single plant is shared within the community. They have a relationship with it. There's a difference here. Like for example, I went fishing with one of the groups, and they got an amazing catch. They pulled up probably about 50 paco, which are river fish. And the first thing you notice is they look at them, they choose 3, and then they throw 50 back. I was like, I have never seen a fisherman throw 90% of his catch back. And not only that, but they chose specifically the medium-sized ones. They didn't choose the biggest ones. And that kind of entails a lot of what goes on here. There's a respect for the environment. There's a sustainability for the environment that it's not taught, it's just in their culture. It's what they know how to do. It's instinctive to them. In terms of medicinal plants, there are shamans that run the medicinal area of the communities. They're called curanderos. These are 2 curanderos. On the left is a guy named Alberto, on the right is a guy named Mateo. The biggest conflict of culture that we saw in the Amazon, because essentially what's going on here is there's a death of a culture. Right? There's an isolation of the culture that has been in the Amazon for generations that is now being encroached on by outside civilization, and different communities are dealing with it differently. For example, Alberto, most respected person in his community, he heals, he uses plants for their purpose, he retains his ancient knowledge, and his kids want to learn from him. Mateo on the right, also curandero, used to be very respected, has been kicked out of his community for trying to teach the kids his medicinal knowledge. That community has now lost all of their plant knowledge. They don't know how to use it anymore. And so that kind of exemplifies the old versus young was a huge topic that we saw. The kids want to go live in the United States, and the parents would just love to teach them what they know. That being said, Alberto, here in his community, the only way he's found a way to survive is through ecotourism, which is very sad in and of itself, because you can see they sit around these plastic chairs. Those are generators over their soccer field, and they're confined to singing and dancing for tourists for like $20 to save their culture. It changes the nature of their culture if you're doing it for money, and it's a hard way to go. Alberto really let us have it. He was a very well-spoken guy, and he told us, you know, his biggest thing was that we didn't used to need you guys. He's like, now I need you. It's like, you stop coming, I don't have money to feed my community. We didn't used to know stress. We didn't used to need money. Now these are things that we can't live without that you've imposed on us. It's like, I don't really know how to deal with it. You fill my kids' heads with fantasies. You come here, my kid wants to be a pilot. My kid's never going to be a pilot. He goes to Lima and he's going to live in a community with other native people who haven't been able to make it. So it was this kind of constant dancing with the darkness where we were trying to find the light, and it was complex. And essentially what you're just trying to find is a way to let these people self-determine and choose how they want to enter the world, rather than entering the world in a state where they are at the bottom, where they come in needing everything and being given nothing. So this is us walking in another community called Shintuya. This was one of the I would say the lighter parts of our trip. Shintuya is a community known for logging. That's how they make the money. They log the forest. This guy, Javier, was a wonderful spirit. He'd taken it upon himself. He didn't believe in logging for whatever reason. The rest of the community thought he was absolutely insane. And he stole trash bags from the local trash dump, and he would replant plants to no profit of his own. And he had a humongous garden of replanted trees and replanted plants. And he just believed, he had this feeling that at someday in the future, reforestation was going to be a thing. He doesn't know that reforestation is already one of the biggest things that we're trying to do globally. So to hear him talk about it and be passionate about it and have these ideas, which I mean he's not educated on, was amazing. So we're going to help him a little bit, set him up with they don't even have internet there, but you can set him up with a website and an email and give him some contact, because that's all he wants to do is share that. He wants to bring people in and have them help replant this forest that they're deforesting. But one of the things that makes the Amazon complex is Christianity, religion, right? Missionaries are one of the most, there's so much history of missionaries in the Amazon. Missionaries came in the 90s, gave medicine to the people, which was great, and it increased their quality of living. But they also started to negate their native language. They started teaching them Spanish. Eventually the missionaries left, and what you're left with are communities where you'll be walking around and be like, hey, there's a light-skinned, blue-eyed child right there. How did that happen? And there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of women that have children that have no fathers. And so you kind of develop this aversion to Christianity. And then in 2005, Colombia came into Manu Park and created this huge drug operation, in which they recruited about 80% of Manu Park to work for them. Peru found out about it, they busted the operation. Obviously the Colombians knew and they were gone, but they threw 80% of the people in the communities in jail. That's where it gets kind of confusing. This is like the whole trip has been like, I don't really know how to feel about things. The Christian church, the Catholic church, then paid for lawyers for every single one of these people and bailed every single one of these community members out of jail. And the community members went back to living in the communities. So you hate the the Catholic Church were coming in and negating the culture, but then you can't be mad at them for saving these people. So that was kind of the back and forth that we had constantly. The furthest community we went to, we found this guy wearing, it's not only a Walmart vest, it's a Walmart employee vest. How he got it, I have no idea. But this brings me to the idea of the real Amazon. National Geographic just posted, or just released an article in their June magazine from this place, Manor National Park. I just read the article yesterday, and I literally, every single person that he photographed, I met. He talks in the story about how this man Elias took him hunting. He wears a soccer jersey and Western shoes and blah, 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 and that it was very surprising. Yet every single one of those photos in the article, if you guys have it, if you go look at it, they're wearing their native garb. They're wearing a kushma. There's not, I think there's maybe one photo where one guy's wearing a pair of shorts. So even though he talks about it, they still weren't willing to present that as reality. And so that's kind of the big problem here, is that they still, like, even the magazine, as for all that is National Geographic, is still trying to show that these people are native, and they're using shock factor to get you to listen, right? These are people, they don't need shock factor to be listened to, because they are people as much as we are people, and they're entering the world as much as a lot of other places are. I'll sit down. And one of the reasons why this is so tough is because they've been giving schooling in the past few years. The problem is that the Peruvian government mandates that everyone goes to school, and they negated to change the curriculum at all for these people. So the kids in the communities in the forest, thousands of miles away from any city, are being taught the same thing that kids in the capital city of Lima are. And they're given essentially the same teachers. These teachers come from Lima, they come from Cusco, and they teach these kids. And they've been given the idea that these kids are savages, that these kids don't really understand anything, and that they need to be educated. Teachers are very interesting figure in society because they've given a lot of power. A lot of times they're the best Spanish speakers, because a lot of these communities didn't originally speak Spanish. Because of that, they kind of become the contact with the outside world, which is conflicting because they're not actually from the communities, but then they're left to represent these communities in discussions with park rangers, with nationals, with government officials that are coming in. And so it wasn't until, this is the last community we went to, called Yonibato, and you can see that he is a little bit, I mean, he's much better off than a lot of his community members. You can't tell, but that is a TV in the background. And so it wasn't until the last community we came to, because in the curriculum in Peru, you teach Spanish. The kids learn Spanish. They go home and they're not supposed to learn anything else. Communities we went to, their native tongue would be Machigenga, Yine, Parakput, or Pura. The 5 communities we went to before this community, the kids were scared to speak it around us, because they thought for some reason we were authority figures, which obviously we come in and we're white, for outsiders, we seem that way. But the kids were fearful to speak it around us, and the adults weren't supposed to, because they weren't supposed to be teaching their kids this native language. It wasn't until the last community we got to that we hear kids openly speaking Machigenga. It was the most beautiful thing. And it was, they would teach us words, we would teach them words in Spanish, English, because they wanted to learn English, even though it had no bearing for them out there. But it was wonderful, and the teachers here spoke Machigenga. So it's like, it's still there, but we had to travel, 20 days down the river, 1,000 miles into the Amazon to find that kind of culture that hasn't been impacted in that sense. And this last community, you kind of see there's a semblance of what they're wearing. The traditional garb is called the kushma, and then there's a mix of Western clothing, and they kind of just wear whatever works best for them. If the kushma happens to be better that day, then they'll wear it. If not, they don't. This is them lining up for the daily school processions. And then you can see some impacts of outsiders who have come and tried to better their lives. In that right side is a standalone 2-toilet facility.
Oh, so what that is?
Yeah, in the middle of nowhere. You can imagine no one uses it, because why would they? Because they've never had toilets, and it's kind of unsanitary to just have toilets sitting around anyway. But this is the kind of thing that outsiders come in and like, we're going to help these people, we're going to give them this. They don't ask them, they don't really, there's no feedback there. And so that's what you end up with.
I thought that was a late stand or something.
Yeah. This man.
That's the altar for after those get-togethers they have.
This man's name is Marcus.
Good to see you.
An awesome guy. You can notice he's wearing a watch. Watches are something that have infiltrated in the past 3 or 4 years. They didn't used to have watches, which is still very clear actually, and is tough to work with because they operate on the time of the jungle. What does that mean? That means when it gets hot, everyone disappears. So if you're supposed to meet someone at noon, they're gone. If it rains, no one does a thing. People just enjoy their rain. So it did make it tough to work at times. Anyways, Marcus took us hunting. They still hunt. They have access to guns, but they don't use them for reasons. They're deadly accurate with arrows, first off. And guns, if you miss or even if you hit, scare away all the other animals, and they're not going to return. That's one of those things where they have access to them, they don't decide to use them. They make their own arrows, and then they go out hunting. But you can see he's wearing a Cushman here, because that's when we got here. Generally, that's how it would happen. Once we would kind of elucidate that, hey, we're actually here just to see who you actually are and how you live, they'd relax a little bit, and then they'd show up in Western clothing. The hunt lasted 4 hours. It was grueling. You'll notice Marcus is barefoot, running through a jungle with roots and snakes and bullet ants, termites and tarantulas. So that was probably one of my favorite things to witness because we're head to toe covered in clothing. We're wearing these knee-high boots to protect our feet. And somehow Marcus and every other indigenous person we met could just kind of fly through the forest. There was an understanding for where they were stepping, for where they were walking. I never saw someone trip once. And we're blundering along, ripping our shirts, tearing on roots. And yeah, so here he is, monkey. They eat monkey. It's one of their prized possessions, and generally they use mother monkeys because they're the slowest. So they keep the young as pets, and the young monkeys are actually awesome. They treat them like babies, and they're part of the family. Here's Marcus kissing his wife. I was going to talk about women's roles in the communities, which are heavily negated, but I don't think I'm going to have time to do that. This is Wito, a fruit that they paint babies, humans, everyone alike with. It's supposed to repel mosquitoes. And this photo, I don't know, I love. One of our photographers had it.
Is that guy smoking a cigarette?
No, that's a nose ring piercing that's just kind of hanging over her lip. This is Gabriel. He told us a very interesting story. When we came out, he took us to these trees, these ancient trees, which kind of exemplifies, I think, the whole trip. For me, at least, a large part of it. He came here and he said, I know that you guys know that we log these trees. Most people think that we do this for money. He's like, we didn't actually start doing this for money. He's like, these trees are hundreds of years old. In the days of my grandfathers, we used to come here and talk to these trees. These trees told us what season to hunt the monkeys with, when the rainy season was going to start, when the dry season was going to start. And we had a relationship that allowed us just huge amounts of success and sustainability. Then some people forgot how to talk to these trees. And the reason we started cutting these trees is because those people were very scared. They were scared because of power imbalance in the community. We don't deal with imbalance as well. For half the community to be able to talk to these trees and have that knowledge and half the community not to was something that we couldn't deal with. So we started cutting down these trees. And now, he stood there and he put his hand on the tree. He said, now I can't talk to this tree. I don't know how to. I've lost it. I don't know if anyone in our community can. We don't talk about it. But this tree, we keep it here just in case someday someone can. And that was kind of the story. And so from a film perspective, what's next? Obviously, there's a lot here that kind of we have to process. I have to go back and kind of watch all this footage. But that young versus old was prevalent everywhere. These are our boat captain. This is a boat captain and our boat deckhand. I'm going to finish with a story of these guys. They're not natives. They're not indigenous. They are Peruvians. The boat captain is 20 years old. He's never traveled out of Atalaya or the river. He's worked on a boat his whole life. He wants to go out and see the world. He wants nothing more. And when we were there, that's all he would ask us about. What's California like? What's your thing? The guy sitting down, 40 years old, one of his best friends, worked on a boat his whole life. When he was 25, he moved to Germany, married a woman, had 3 kids, traveled the world, went to Asia and Indonesia. 8 years ago, he came back, and he decided that I saw the world. There was no place better than this, and I forgot the knowledge that I've had. I've been here trying to refine it. I'm going to stay here the rest of my life. And that was kind of the dichotomy between them. And yeah, that was the story. And so now I had a blast. I got to nurse my health a little bit. I think I'm harboring a couple parasites, and go back and deal with post-processing. Sit in the computer room for I don't know, probably about 3 weeks, and then we're going to try to make it to some film festivals. It's going to be 23 minutes, which I don't know how we're going to cut it down that short. But 23 minutes is the average length of a TV program, so if it goes really well, that's where it'll end up. It's kind of a dream though. And yeah, apply for some post-processing grants, see if we can get some funding to kind of kick into some professional editing, and that's what I got.
Wow.
I have some minutes for questions.
Question, on the monkeys, when after they raise them up, they ate them?
No, it's a little more cynical than that. They actually, monkeys are sociable, like humans, they want friends. So when the monkeys grow up, they want other monkeys around, which gives them chances to hunt other monkeys.
Oh, okay, smart.
So it's a mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah. So actually, I mean, so that's controlled by the government, right? Is that more like,
What's controlled by
you know, to get into the place, you know, to
Yeah,
get...
the restricted zone, there was a checkpoint that we had to pass and get through by the
Okay,
administration.
so is it kind of like, I mean, I know it's becoming more westernized because the clothes and everything
So
else.
that was the sad part. So the people on the outside want, like the community where I showed you with Alberto, where they're dancing for money,
Right,
want nothing more than to go back to a time than before they were doing that.
right.
People on the inside want nothing more than to be given the opportunity to have their own ecotourism business.
So is
There's this
it,
dichotomy where these people want
Yeah.
what these people have realized that they never wanted.
so is the government treating it like, almost like a zoo, where they have the outside people coming in, like cameras, and say, look at these people, so it's like, you know, come in and take a look at what they're doing and stuff like that?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, on the outside, you're free to do whatever you want. The government doesn't really worry too much about it. On the inside, the government, for now, has told them that they can't do things like blog, they can't do things like have
Right,
visitors. And so,
yeah.
of course, when you tell someone that they can't have something, they want it.
Right,
So, the government generally has negated the area pretty well.
right. So-
To give you some context, these communities never used to be static. They were nomadic, which works well in the jungle because you deplete an area of its resources and you move to another area, just
Right.
like rotating crops.
Yeah.
The government came in and said, you live here now.
That's it, right.
And so, of course, now they're dealing with where they can't necessarily find as much fish as they had. They can't find as much because they can't move, because
Right.
they're stuck in these areas.
Yeah, and the government says, come on in, take a look, film these people and stuff
Yeah.
like that, and it's really not like it's a natural thing anymore, right? So it's,
Are there more primitive tribes further into the Amazon that are
Yes.
less
There are. They all relatively reflect about what we saw because we got in a restricted zone.
oh, wow.
There's still uncontacted, what they call uncontacted tribes, which tribes that just don't make contact with outsiders.
So those people would possibly not be wearing Western garb.
We saw some. It's illegal to take photos of them. It's illegal to approach them. They were wearing Western clothing.
They were?
It was probably about a 14-year-old boy, a 13-year-old girl, her baby, and they were standing on the side of the river where supposedly they make contact with people from the communities who give them things.
Oh.
So, uncontacted is a sexy term that doesn't really exist anymore. Yeah.
Tell us about the women. You said there are some interesting things about them.
Yeah. Okay. So what I was gonna say is, let's see. This photo is an unordinate amount of affection. We never saw that. So Marcus was a really special guy. The women generally they're housewives, but they're just kind of, that's their role. What I was going to talk about is and this is kind of dark, but it's true, they have, the one right that they really do have is to their child. Now, the babies are had fairly regularly, but it's immensely difficult to raise a child in the jungle. As you can imagine, there's not a lot of food, there's not a lot of protection, there's a lot of things that can get them. It requires the full attention of the mother. The mother doesn't have a connection with the child. It's not worth it to her. So one of the rights that she has is to decide that she doesn't want that child. So infanticide is actually pretty high in the jungle. Because they just can't, if there's no connection between child and mother, and that's not going to grow into something worthwhile, that's going to be a unit, and she just decides of her own right that she doesn't want that child, because the jungle leaves it. Generally, in the first 1 or 2 years, she can decide that. And
Wow.
yeah, this photo is, so the kushmas that they wear, the women, when they have their first period, and this is a practice that used to be very common that is not quite as much anymore. When they have the first period, generally, at least in the furthest community, they go into like this kind of isolation, where for 30 days they spin the cotton like this, required to make a kushma. A kushma is generally, every one of those community members has one kushma, and if you're a guy, it was given to you by your wife. She has her first period, shaves her head, or doesn't shave her head now, it's kind of up to her, which is pretty cool. Spins enough cotton to make a kushma, and when she comes out, she makes one, and then suitors come, and she decides who she wants for a husband. Now, previously used to be the chief that decided. So women are actually kind of, it's one of those things that women are being given more rights. I'm not sure if it's because of outside contact, or if it's because some of the kids are going to study. I met a girl who decided she didn't want to get married, she didn't want to have a child, and she was going to go become a soccer player, and that was really cool. But yeah, where can I go with that? At the same time, that's just kind of, that's how the culture's been, right? Because the women are very powerful. They tend to the crops. There are certain things that only women can do, and there are certain things only men can do. Yeah, this is a photo of a woman holding her baby. In her left hand, or in her right hand, she's holding a CD. Stories are one of the biggest forms of currency. So we had contact with an anthropologist who'd been working in the area for ages. He had recorded stories from a generation ago and given them to us to bring back to them. They do have, like in each community, they probably have 1 or 2 ways to play these CDs. So we gave them the CDs. There's these old, it was like their grandfathers telling stories of Machi culture. One of the funniest things we always ran into these problems with is that we would come in and they would, rightly so, say, what are you doing for us? You're just exploiting our stories so you can make an image and come back. And we dealt with some depression in the group about what we were actually doing. But it was the funniest thing. You could sit down and you could break down that barrier because Marcus would tell you a story and then you would go ahead and, I remember Kevin, our anthropologist, sitting there and was like, all right, you want to hear about how we think the world started? And then you went ahead and recanted the Big Bang. And I could just see his eyes. It was this funny thing where all of a sudden I realized Marcus wasn't just telling us a story. He was telling us how the world started. Just the same way that in us telling the Big Bang, we're telling him how the world started. But when there's that, when you're relaying it to someone like that, it's just a story. And it kind of makes you realize how fickle and fictitious everything is. And once you realize that, yeah, it's any kind of story you could tell them. We tell them stories. They have stories of mermaids. We have stories of sirens in the sea. And so that was one of their greatest pleasures from us, was hearing about that.
In what language did you communicate?
Spanish, mostly. We had a couple translators for Machi, but the old speak very broken Spanish. So I learned Spanish while I was there, which was funny because at the beginning, the fluent speakers were dealing with everything, but as we got further and further, all of a sudden they were they could not be understood, and it was kind of my broken Spanish worked very well with their broken Spanish. And so the community member would turn to me like, "What did your friend say?" I have no idea.
I bet you also speak French like your mom does. Yeah, okay.
What about the
Did you
disease?
have a chance to talk to the park rangers?
In what regard?
Well, did you get to sit down and actually have them share stories? And,
Yeah,
and talk
yeah. We did a lot of interviews. That was generally how we got. Which interviews are valuable because they're not used to sitting down and talking. But most people give a pedestal. You give them a pedestal, and they'll kind of use it. The park rangers are interesting. They've seen a lot of change. Like the boat drivers and the boat captains, they're outsiders, but they're not. The community members view them. They realize that they're there trying to make a living. They're not the system. They're still like part of the system. The park rangers are enforcing a park that they have to believe in, but the idea of a park doesn't really exist for these people. They've lived in these areas for hundreds of years, they've been free to roam, and all of a sudden, back in the 90s, they were told, okay, now this is a national park, and these are jungle boundaries, and boundaries in the jungle, you go there and you're like, there's no boundaries here. Yeah. So.
What was the cost?
What was the cost? We ran the Kickstarter for a hopeful $16,000. We got that. We had $5,000 previously fundraised. When I budgeted the cost of everything, it was actually more like 24. And I initially put the Kickstarter up for that much, and then I ran the numbers and I realized we weren't going to make that. So I cut it, and we just, in like traditional fashion, we'll kind of deal with it later. And so I'm dealing with it later. that's where I'm at now. But there's post-production grants that you can write to get money for editing. There's a lot of short documentary and funds for films that boards of grant society need to be told. So.
And you ate the fruit, you ate the monkeys and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We tried them a little bit. We tried not to eat the community's food in general. We brought our own food just because they're short on food.
Oh,
So
okay.
you don't want to come in. But I do remember this one time we were drinking Masato with the community members. We were pretty drunk, and in the communities, everyone drinks Masato. I just remember looking over. I was talking to the chief about hunting, and I look over, and like there's the baby monkey in the Masato bowl, just completely hammered. And he looks up and he's got Masato all over his face. And to that point, I was like, yeah, I'm probably got a parasite. Yeah.
Are the natives immune to most of those, like the parasites that you pick up?
They take anti-parasite pills every 6 months. When
They
they're
do,
kids.
even the locals do.
Yeah. So I think there's some stuff that's been introduced from the outside, or when they've got access to medicine, it's just a quality of life kind of thing, where they were living with them okay before, but now they're healthier with them.
Yeah.
And so when they told us that, we were like, okay, yeah, we'll get on that when we get back.
Last question, Ben,
I
then.
actually want to give it to this young man here. He has had it for a long
The
time.
diseases of the parasites, the typical disease that you would take back, or do you have skin disease from the water, or how does that work?
Flu is the most dangerous for them, right? So the common cold is what kills them. And so before I went there, like I had to get a whole bunch of shots, but influenza was the one that caught me. Like I said, Discovery Channel went there in 2008 and ended up killing 20 people with the common cold. In terms of what you might bring back, our health mainly entailed keeping things dry, right? The Amazon's so wet that if you get a cut or you get a scrape, there's just so many chances for bacteria to grow in there. But because you're not in an urban area, malaria is not really a worry, dengue is not really a worry. Those are diseases that thrive on human numbers, so they don't have to worry too much about that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Great.